What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 151 of the Sweet Run podcast. My name is Gerald, and along with my co-host, Nat Runs Far, we bring you a conversation with Allison Yamamoto. Allison is a sports nutrition coach. She's a former Division I cheerleader and avid distance runner. In this conversation, we talk about a particular women's syndrome or condition called amenorrhea. Fellas, don't check out. This is for you too. If you are a boyfriend, a husband, a father of daughters, this is going to be a great listen. So guys, you need to be able to support the women in your life who are highly intense athletes if they are dealing with amenorrhea. Amenorrhea is often brought on by stress, poor nutrition, and overdoing it in intense workouts for long, sustained periods of time. Think high-level runner, okay? So we're going to have a great conversation. Allison brings a whole lot of information. And then we jump into Brooklyn, New York. Again, I know we've hit Brooklyn a few times, but every single time we get something new, we get something fresh and fun. So please stay tuned, listen in to our conversation with Allison Yamamoto.
Allison Yamamoto, welcome to the Sweet Run podcast. We are really happy to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited for this discussion.
Yeah, glad to have you here. And we're interested in Brooklyn and Allison Yamamoto. And there's some good things you have going on. So let's go.
I know. Well, we always like to talk about the sport of running and how you kind of got into the sport and why you love it and whatever you want to share with us.
Yeah, I would love to start there. All right. So I would say that I come from a family where there's a lot of athleticism going on. My dad is somebody who was always a runner. He would even do like 100 milers. So I have the propensity for a very active lifestyle. I ended up cheerleading in college and then getting right into running right afterwards, where I was running maybe shorter distances, eventually went down that slippery slope that we sometimes do where it became half marathons and then marathons. And then actually during that time for about 4 to 6 years, I ended up losing my period as a result of how much I was training and the way that I was fueling or not fueling super effectively during that time, while being increasingly mostly self-competitive about how I was approaching running. And then when I realized how prevalent that issue was, I ended up, and also the health risks that were associated with that, I ended up investing in my own recovery. And then having gone through that experience, felt really inspired to help other people to do the same. And that's been my focus area ever since then. But I will say that it's something that I very much struggled with as a runner. And now having understood the importance of getting a regular period, feeling a little bit more appropriately and strategically, but then also training in a way that was more sustainable, I find that my running journey has been greatly impacted and transformed by that whole experience.
Now, I just want to know how much do collegiate, how much do collegiate cheerleaders train in terms of endurance? I know the guys. I'm seeing the lifts and then the bouncing and the twirling. So, what kind of cardio are we doing, or is that just all weightlifting and stretching?
It's such a good question. So I would say that in high school when I was cheerleading, there was a cardio component in the sense that we would do cardio training as part of our normal training plan. But then when I got to college, we actually didn't do that much cardio in the workouts that we were doing as a team. Almost everything, unless you include a lot of the choreography that we were doing, which I think actually would probably be fair to include. So a lot of our training was about choreo. It was about learning those various routines. So that was more dance based. And especially if you're doing any sort of routine, then we'd be blocking that routine, doing it on the field. And then a huge component of it was the more strength based training, which was anything from stunting, which is a huge component that's also fairly high risk. It's when we're lifting each other and throwing each other around up in the air, layering ourselves on top of one another. in stunt formations as well as tumbling. So that's what you think is more of the gymnastics component of cheerleading. You're really bringing me back here now to my cheerleading days, which I've since forgotten about in some capacity. But so a lot of the training comes down to those aspects and mostly performance oriented. So preparing for a game in the same way that you might practice for a performance and going through all the preparation that be required.
Yeah, I just had to ask because when people come from other sports into running, I usually can see like it's a direct connection, but clearly, like you said, athletic family, dad's doing the 100 milers. So maybe more of that is the connection than tossing people around in the air. Hey, let's go run a marathon. So, but anyway, I digress. And if I, as a guy, can tell you, we're talking a bit about amenorrhea. Is that
Exactly. Yes, I'm very
okay? Cool.
impressed. Yeah.
All right,
Wow, you
I'm
Wow.
well
nailed it. Yeah.
trained. I'm well trained.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
It's
This is
funny because
a
there's so many people that they're like, I cannot even pronounce the word, but yeah, specifically, it's usually functional hypothalamic amenorrhea, which is definitely a mouthful, but yes, that is usually the terminology that we're using to identify somebody that is particularly struggling with exercise and nutrition, and then therefore experiencing menstrual disturbances.
yes. As a woman in the sport for a long time, and now I have two daughters, and you just read so much about women athletes and what the pressures and what they go through, whether they're just training on their own or training with a team. And it feels like we're trying to get better as a society and as sports as a whole. But I feel like for a long time, there was a lot of pressure on women to look a certain way, or, the untrue thoughts about weighing less means you're going to be a better athlete, which is we know is not true. And really went down this slippery slope of women losing their periods. And we've not had someone on the show to talk about this. So I'm really excited to kind of dig in and give our listeners support and just some information. So, I know I experienced when I was running in college losing my period for about 6 or 7 months. And I didn't think anything about it. Like, no one was there to educate me. I didn't really feel like I could talk. I had a male coach, so I didn't feel like I could really talk to him about it. So tell us, what are some of the warning signs, and what should women be looking for, especially athletes?
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that's interesting about this is that oftentimes, to your point on, especially for athletes, especially when you're endurance oriented, is this notion that we are used to ignoring signs because we're sticking to a training program or because we're really disciplined or because we can. I mean, we're used to, I mean, if it's not, we're a lot of times runners are the type of folks that even in injuries, there has to be something so severe to require me to take time off that I literally cannot run. So I think that we have this mentality and this predisposition to ignore some of these more subtle signs that something could be off. And of course, like actually missing your period is a huge one. But some of the ones that are more subtle would be feeling cold a lot of the time. It'd be feeling irritable. You might have indigestion. You might have lower libido or frequent urination. Your hair might start to thin or your nails might start to be a little bit more brittle than usual. And then, of course, you're actually could be experiencing more tiredness, more fatigue, especially after a longer run. You might be experiencing more injuries, or even stagnation in your performance. And so these are areas where the intersection between some of the more subtle signs will actually meet the performance goals that we have and how we're showing up as runners. And that is areas where, to your point, the demystification of the fact that a smaller body is always going to be the fittest body or the highest performing body, especially in running, can really be broken down because some of these areas are exactly the causational factors to decreasing your performance in order to achieve some of those body standards that we think that we have to. And that was absolutely a mistake that I was making. And it did show up in my performance, which wasn't even something that I entirely realized until I understood what it felt like on the other side to not be in that situation.
Mm.
So if a woman is, an endurance athlete and she loses her period, I mean, 1 month it could be like, well, there could be many things that's going on with their body, and
Right.
maybe there's no reason to be alarmed. What would you say, when should, a woman go to her doctor and say like, hey, let's check out and see what's happening with my body?
Yeah, so they usually recommend about 3 to 6 months. If it's consistent for 3 to 6 months that you're not experiencing your period, then at that point you really should address the issue and try to understand what's going on. And I usually like to ensure that folks are educated about what the risks are if that is happening. Because to your point, it's really hard to differentiate between what's normal and or even what just might be an anomaly. You might have had a stressful month and maybe that might have been a causational factor versus something that's a little bit more chronic. And essentially, the longer that we're in this state where we might be lower in the production of our reproductive hormones, the greater we're putting ourselves at risk at some of these longer and shorter term health risks and health factors that are at play when we're in that low energy availability for a more chronic state. And so it is one of those things where if that's happening to you on a fairly consistent basis, being more proactive about understanding what's going on, making changes in response to some of those factors, if your menstrual cycle is missing, trying to make changes faster is definitely a gold standard, but seeking support if it's something that's happening on a consistent basis.
And I love how passionate you are on the subject. So, like, tell us how you got to, you've been studying and kind of educating yourself about this issue. So, tell us a little bit about your personal story.
Yeah, so I would say that it started because I was personally struggling with this issue for several years, and I would get really confusing information about it, where I might go into a clinician and they might say something to me like, well, you exercise a lot, and so this is actually expected. Or because you're training for marathons, that is what just happens when you're training at that load. And so for a very long time, I didn't even think there was an issue. I suspected that something was off, but I didn't understand that there were health risks to the situation that I was in, to the fact that me missing a period was not just something that was an issue if I wanted to get pregnant, which wasn't one of my goals at the time. And so therefore it was a really easy issue to deprioritize. When in reality, it was impacting my bone health, it was impacting my cardiovascular health, my immune system, and all these other factors. And when I started to become more and more educated about it, it really kind of lit the fire in me to want to be able to help other people. And I think that the other aspect of it was that the recovery process was a lot more challenging for me to navigate than I had anticipated. And I think that as somebody who is used to being fairly disciplined and fairly regimented, in the sense that if somebody tells me to do something, typically I'll do it. If someone gives me a training plan, I will follow it. So I'm like kind of one of those types of people. And so I think that there was a lot of dissonance for me in the sense of how I was perplexed by how hard it was for me to just wake up and make some of the changes that seemed like they were fairly straightforward. And so then in understanding that some of these changes and some of these underlying causational factors that are sitting beneath the surface that are motivating people to have that degree of discipline or to have that relationship with their food and exercise is also what really motivated me to help other people become more passionate about the issue and to be able to provide support options for folks that might be experiencing the same thing.
So now this may be jumping the gun, but the problem solver in me wants to just ask, okay, so was it take the exercise down, bring the food up, calories up, or something totally different? Or what combination of the two got you back on track, and how long did it take?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're like, let's just get straight to the solution.
I'm sorry.
No, I love
I'm,
it. I love
I'm,
it.
a,
I love
I'm
it.
a sales guy, and so it's always like, tell me the solution, tell me the solution. So I'm like, okay, I've
It's
got
what
two
sells.
daughters. I
Yeah.
don't want to, I don't want, if they are like, well, they'd probably actually never tell me about that, would they? They probably,
Yeah,
they'd go,
I don't
yeah,
know. I don't know. Maybe
they
they'd
probably
come to
wouldn't tell.
me anyway.
But anyway, I still want to know. I'm just curious.
Yeah, about their menstrual issues. So that's the other thing that's interesting though, because your point on the male coach, it's, who do you go to and also who are you seeking advice from? But yeah, so a lot of this is caused by energy availability, which is essentially the process where you're energy deficient, which is causing your body to divert resources from what they're considered secondary functions like hormonal or reproductive into the core bodily functions. And so what that requires is to address the energy availability. And in some cases that does require a decrease in exercise. And of course that will make it a lot easier to restore energy availability. But I think it's also an interesting, dynamic, because there are instances where how you're relating to exercise can be addressed by starting to shift how you're training and to really challenge some of the standards you might have set for yourself in terms of exercise, especially if it's more compulsive. The other side of it, you hit it on the head, which is addressing the energy availability in terms of fueling appropriately. And one of the mistakes that I see people making really commonly is just thinking, okay, well, that just means I need to eat more. That's great. Super simple. I'll just go do that. How hard could it be? And energy availability is something that happens not just at the end of the day in terms of this scorecard, but it's something that's happening throughout the day. So there are actually ways that you should be fueling around your training, how you should be fueling throughout the day, making sure that you're getting the biggest mistake that I usually see people making is enough carbs to actually fuel your training, especially as an endurance athlete, is very, very key. And all of those things can help restore the energy availability. So yes, of course, you do need to be eating more. And at the end of the day, you're right in terms of that balance needs to be restored. And the way that somebody does that is usually by ensuring that they're eating more consistently throughout the day. They're getting the right volume of macros relative to what their output, physical activity, goals, etc. are, needs, and as well as ensuring that around their training, they're ensuring that they're never getting into major energy deficits like they might have been before.
So, Allison, this is all such good info. So, where are you compiling all of this awesome information? Like, did you go back and get formalized training? Are you working with medical professionals? Like, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's a combination of the two. So I ended up getting formalized training in this specific issue around hypothalamic amenorrhea and the support and resources, and also like the clinical recommendations on how to address some of these areas, as well as developing a team of clinical advisors. Because it's such a multidisciplinary issue in its current state, it could require anyone from a dietitian to a reproductive endocrinologist to an orthopedic physician or professional to a sports medicine person. And I think that one of the things that for me was really frustrating about the situation was the fact that I had identified as somebody who was otherwise quite healthy, and that's the feedback I was getting from other people, and to then be told that I needed to see 4 to 5 different specialists to be able to treat an issue that essentially we just reduced to let's restore that energy availability was really mind-blowing to me. And it felt like such a shock that that would be something that I would need to be able to navigate on my own. It was scary, and it was also, I was in denial. And so that was also one of the things that made me really passionate about this issue, is being able to provide people with support without feeling like they had to navigate this really complex seeming landscape on their own. And so I think that that was key in terms of being able to bring a lot of like-minded folks together to be able to combine that expertise and understand what are the different lenses that people are looking at this issue.
You know, it's interesting. So I feel like when we talk about the sport of running, it's like, oh, running is so easy, right? It doesn't cost anything. You just get a pair of shoes. And then once you really start to dig deep into our sport, you realize that that's not necessarily true. So I bring that up to say if there's a woman out there listening and she's like, yeah, I haven't had my period in a while, or I feel like I'm dealing with some nutrition issues and I don't know if I'm necessarily getting enough. And I think that my body might be calling for attention. but I don't have the money to put together a big team of people like, all of the medical professionals, or even I don't even have the money because I'm already paying for a coach, say for instance. So I
Mm.
don't have the resources to now get a dietitian to work with me and all the things that is going to help me to be a better athlete. What would you say to a person in that situation?
Yeah, I think that it's an interesting one because there's sort of two different camps of people I find that are struggling with this type of issue. One is that they lack the information. So they lack the understanding of what they need to be doing to be able to feel appropriately. And then the other camp is they have a hunch that they're not feeling appropriately, but there's underlying motivators that are keeping them stuck in what they're doing right now. And the reason I like to split them into those two camps is that it actually really does matter because what the approach is for how to address the issue would really differ between those two camps of people, where one might benefit from a conversation, from reading. There's actually a lot of clinical studies at this point about the importance of some of these different nutritional factors that you can self-serve. There's podcast episodes, there's so much information, it's almost overwhelming. And I think that it would be the trick and the challenge that you'll run into is trying to piece apart what's credible from what's noise. And that's something that if you're going to go the self-sufficient route, that's the risk that you're going to have to cut through and maybe validate with some of the studies that you're seeing online. There are also books and resources that you could check out from the library that are focused around this topic that I'm happy to send some of the examples of this. But a lot of those, the only risk that you're running is that it's not going to be catered towards you, which means that it's fairly generalized advice, which means that sometimes you might be making compromises around your lifestyle and things that you wouldn't otherwise have to make if you were to work with someone more individualized. I would say that if you're the type of person who already probably has that information and yet are still unable to make those changes, that's an area where you might be looking in the wrong areas. In other words, if you already have the information, getting more information is not necessarily going to suddenly ignite the changes that are keeping you stuck. And this can be a much trickier realm and area, but I will say that one of the first steps in starting to understand that route is understanding what is really motivating you to keep you stuck. What is the driver that's trapping you in this routine around fitness, around exercise? And that actually is something that I have a free resource around if that's something that you're interested in. And whether you start working with us or not, starting to understand what are those drivers for myself is one of the first steps to start making the changes and understanding how you can start to shift your beliefs to make the changes that you've potentially been procrastinating or delaying for any period of time now.
This is such an important topic because I think just as we were talking earlier about injuries and people, there's a real problem with people wanting to take a break if they're injured, right? It's like there's a fear that sometimes it's even hard for them to address. It's like, if I take time off, what's going to happen? I'm going to get out of shape, or I'm not going to be able to perform the way I want to, or there's just, I'm sure, a whole list of reasons why someone feels that way. But not knowing that the rest is going to help your body. The same as if I eat more, right? It's going to fuel my body and help it, perform even better and become a fitter individual, as opposed to like, oh my gosh, if I eat too much, unfortunately we don't want to say this, but like, oh, I feel like I'm going to gain weight, or my body's not going to look the way I want it to, or it's not going to feel the way I want it to feel. And so then there's this cycle, um and then you're under fueling, and you don't feel confident in the way you're fueling. So I don't really know where I'm going with that, but
It's backwards.
yeah.
You have to really reverse how you think about things. More fuel, hey, more running, more fuel. You would think makes sense, but we oftentimes don't do that. And more rest, better performance. Well, no. I got to get the extra workout in, and more miles, and more, and so it's I think,
Which is why training for a marathon is not necessarily, that's not a weight loss program,
right,
right?
yeah.
Allison, what would you say to that?
Yes, I Could not agree more. It's so funny that you say that because I do think that so many people go into it with that motivation, which I think is something to be self-aware about. If that's something that you're really motivated by in marathon training, then just having that awareness, there are other ways to achieve a potentially aesthetic goal if that is your primary motivator. And in marathon training, the amount that you have to fuel, the amount that you have to focus, and for I'm going to speak for myself individually here because I know how much discipline it requires for me to be disciplined, not necessarily about the training program, but about the rest days and about taking easy days easy and about
Mhm.
fueling so much more functionally. It's not about the amount that I'm thinking about ensuring that I'm fueling at certain points in certain runs or at certain times of the day, that I'm not necessarily just sitting there waiting for whether or not I'm experiencing hunger. Like an example of this would be immediately after a long run. All the time, athletes are saying, I'm not hungry, so I'm not going to eat. And yet, the importance of being able to fuel yourself for that functional purpose, even if it's not necessarily based on what you would conventionally view as a physiological hunger cue, is so key. And to the point where some of the times that I've been like the fittest or been outputting the most in my training have not correlated at all whatsoever with the times that I was the leanest or the lightest. And so I think that breaking down that correlation is so key. And I love what you mentioned about the rest days with exercise, because I think that that's actually a huge gap that we often don't really acknowledge, which is how we are relating to exercise and how overtraining is a component of this. And so, yes, of course, there is this like nutritional component for sure. And I think that for the folks that do resonate with this compulsion around exercise, that's something that shouldn't slip through the cracks. And it's something that you can still train and maybe even train better if you do address some of those areas where you are exercising super compulsively or you feel like you're overemphasizing the short term win or comfort of getting that run in today, even though I'm hurting somewhere over the 2 day, 3 day. This is not even like long term, although it is as well, but even just like the short, medium term of how that could impact you in your training. And I'm saying this as somebody who was absolutely guilty of this for a really, really long time and absolutely terrified of doing something different than what I had known for so long because it felt very safe, very, very safe to continue doing what I was doing.
Absolutely. Oh, I was going to ask you, Allison. Okay, so for women that are listening right now, say there's a woman and she's like, okay, I'm all in on this sport, right? I spend the money to go to races, I'm traveling to races, maybe I even have a coach, I'm paying for race entries, and I know that I have this an issue, or maybe I just need to have someone really take a look at my profile, look at me, and like guide me in the right direction. But I only can pick one professional to help me in this situation. What would you say, what would you tell them to do? Which medical professional would you have them choose?
Yeah. So I would say that if they're experiencing amenorrhea, meaning that they're missing their period, then you're making me choose Sophie's choice here. But I would say that they should really see a reproductive endocrinologist or some sort of endocrinologist
Okay.
because it is helpful to get a diagnosis to rule out other potential causes for menstrual disturbances. Now, I say that with hesitation because really, if the underlying root cause is around their nutrition and is around their exercise, then that isn't going to be the full programming to get them to recover. But I do think that that can be helpful as a first step just to ensure that if there is specifically a menstrual issue, that they're seeing somebody who can rule out those other factors that could be causing that same issue that's presenting. Now, with that said, a couple of things that I will say is one, this can absolutely impact men as well. 100% it can impact men. It's harder sometimes to realize that this is occurring because they don't have that feedback loop of the menstrual cycle, but there are still diagnostic criteria. And this is an issue that I've seen happen in men. I've supported men who have experienced this issue as well. And so I don't want to leave them completely hanging because this is still an issue. And the underlying root cause, which is usually called red S, which is that energy deficiency, is something that is agnostic of men or women. But
Thank
with
you
that,
so much.
yeah.
I'm so glad you
Yeah.
brought that up. And I didn't mean to leave men out of this conversation because they absolutely, and I have heard about men suffering from red S. And you're right, they don't have the feedback of saying, "Oh, I lost my menstrual cycle." So, what would you say for men? What would be a warning sign like, "Oh, wow, I've got a problem going on here"?
Yeah, and it's still a lot of the same early warning sign signals from the perspective of maybe increased injuries. Training performance could be stagnating or even decreasing. They could be seeing abnormal blood test or like lab results. And then the other one that's sort of a corollary to the menstrual cycle is actually in erectile function. And so if they're seeing decreased erections relative to what they are maybe had experienced prior, then that's also a major warning flag for men. And the other myth that I commonly see with folks who are struggling with this issue is that it only impacts people in smaller bodies, or it only impacts people that are actively losing weight or have recently lost weight. And although that can be a sign and that can be a leading indicator, it's not always the case. And so oftentimes, unfortunately, those people can be dismissed either because they're dismissing themselves or because they don't appear on the surface to be someone that might profile as this issue. But it is something that can impact people in all body types and isn't necessarily correlated with weight loss in all cases.
Yeah.
Right.
So regular checkups, blood work on some frequency, and, maybe some way charting your, energy level relative to, performance and what type of workouts you're doing, keeping some type of journaling could at least for definitely for guys, but men or women, could give you some of those signals like, wait a minute, I'm off track. I was 6 months ago, I could do this and it didn't impact me this way. Now all of a sudden it's been impacting me, this way for 3 months. What else is going on? You start to eliminate, and definitely if you're going to get checked out on a regular basis, you'd see those clear clinical markers of, you know, hormones or your blood work changing over time. Sounds like that's some regular maintenance is going to keep you at least in tune.
Yeah, and I even want to simplify it a little bit more in the sense that oftentimes folks that are experiencing this, some of the biggest leading indicators are the fact that they're thinking about food constantly. They're trying to control their food. They're trying to limit their food. They
Mm,
label certain foods as bad. They feel
Mhm.
guilty around food or guilty around exercise. And so some of those more mental or behavioral aspects are some of the strongest leading indicators. And I say that because in the majority of cases, people have a sense that they're at risk. And
mm,
if you're to the point where you're trying to flirt with that line,
you're
like I'm
there.
only willing to barely fuel enough to meet the
Mhm.
minimum level of requirements, and I need to get a clinical checkup regularly to ensure that I'm meeting that very low threshold,
Yeah.
that likely you are under fueling. And I just say that because a lot of times there are so many behaviors that we're falling into that are causing and continuing to reinforce the patterns and the habitual underfueling that people tend to know. So it's not necessarily something where it's like if you're not getting that regular clinical checkup, you really have to study every single lab and you'll have to know it's usually such that, well, also if you feel like you have to exercise to earn your food, or if you feel like you're avoiding certain food or food groups, those are the biggest warning signs. And usually it's kind of one of those, like, if you know types of things where people are falling into these types of patterns.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good.
If you're checking that you're there, you're probably already there. If you're over obsessing, am I in this space? Am I in this space? Yes, you're probably in that space. At least, like you said, the big stuff.
And I was completely shaking my head on the earning your food and all of that. That should not come into we shouldn't be thinking that. But I know that people do, athletes do, and people think that. So have those thoughts. I wanted to also ask you, Allison, you were saying earlier, if people want to work with us. So tell us,
who's us?
who's us and what is that all about? I'm interested.
Yeah, so I have started a coaching practice, and it's a company called Ally. And this is a program that I have developed in partnership with my team of clinical advisors. And it's very individualized support. So it's really a good fit for folks that are ready to work with someone and really understand where they're coming from. And we do everything from the nutritional support all the way to the psychological elements and working through those changes in tandem. And what I found is that through that type of approach, the changes not only become slightly easier to navigate because it's fairly uncomfortable to do anything outside of what you've already been doing for a really long time, but it also makes the changes stickier. And that's one of the things that I think is really critical, because a lot of the time, especially with us runners, we are using running to fix a lot of things like stress. And if we're going through something, then we find safety in running, and it becomes a lot of things. And so what happens is, if we don't address some of these underlying things, not only does it feel a lot harder to actually make these changes, but it can also be really vulnerable to regressions. And that might happen to any of us with anything, really. Which is that when we go into a mode where we're stressed, we go back to what feels safe. And sometimes those habits are good and sometimes they're not good. But it's just to say that having those strategies and feeling like you're more eyes wide open about how you're navigating some of these changes can make it a lot more powerful when those situations happening where you're very tempted to fall back into some of these other behaviors. And so if folks are interested in working with myself and with our program, then that is absolutely something that I would love to hear from you. And I'm sure that we can provide resources in terms of getting connected.
Cool.
Awesome. We'll put everything in the show notes for people to contact you.
No.
Well, our show is unique in the sense that we love to talk about travel, and we know you live in Brooklyn and you are a runner and know all the things. So we want to hear, if we come to Brooklyn, where are you going to take us on a run?
So I would absolutely take you to Prospect Park. And have you guys been to Prospect Park before?
I have not. So I'm excited to go.
Okay. Well, so Prospect Park, I really like it because one of the annoyances about running in New York is finding areas where you have uninterrupted runs.
Yeah.
Because the blocks aren't that big. And so if you are running on the streets, you are inevitably stopping repeatedly. Even if you get lucky with green lights, best case scenario, you're probably making it maybe a half mile. Maybe that would be a really good day. And so I love Prospect Park because it's an area where you can do uninterrupted runs. And I also know it at this point like the back of my hand. And I'm not like some runners where I want every single run to be completely new and novel. Sometimes I like to know, okay, there's a hill coming. This is when the hill is coming. And I know the distance and I don't have to necessarily have my watch on. I know what it's going to be. And I know the different routes and I won't be lost and then scared that I won't be able to get back to where I was before. And so that's another thing that I really like about Prospect Park. It's pretty straightforward. It's hard to get lost. It has terrain that isn't always the case in New York City. And it gives you a little bit of space to be in a place where you're not just going by a bunch of storefronts. It is crowded, but almost everyone in the park is doing some sort of activity. They're running, they're walking, they're biking. And so you feel like you have a little bit of a community there. and it's kind of like our little mini version of Central Park.
Oh, I was
Yeah.
gonna ask, how does it compare? But
Yeah.
that's great. That
Way
sounds like
smaller.
beautiful. Way smaller.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
again, shout out to city parks of
Yes.
all sizes, but the bigger the better, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that because it's so small, Prospect Park really is small. So it's a little over 3 miles if you do the normal loop. And that's the loop where if you just stay on it, you cannot get lost and you can go around as many times as you like. There's a couple hills, but that's not that big. It may be compared to a decent sized lake in certain other areas, but it's definitely big enough. And I think that it's something that you can lap. There's also specific cut throughs that you can go through. It cuts the park in half. And so one thing I also like to do is for longer runs, do a type of figure eight of sorts. And it makes it feel a lot longer. You can avoid certain hills if you want to, but I do a lot of runs in that park. And so I think that there's all different, if you want to do sprints, you can do sprints. If you want to hill work, you can do hill work. Tempos, you can do tempos. So I have seen a lot of different types of runs go on in that Prospect Park area, and a lot of run clubs in Brooklyn will do their runs through that park. So it definitely feels like you're amongst a lot of other runners when you're in Prospect Park.
Yeah, no, that's actually good to know, because you can feel like, oh, it's the same thing, but that either you do or a bunch of people are going to recommend. But to know that you could do the same park 4, 5, 6 different ways and have a different experience, I think is awesome to get those perspectives from different runners. And yeah, you're with your people, right? There's active runners and, like you said, all type of folks. And so now, because we've talked about it so much, we have to fuel properly.
We do have to fuel properly.
So we want to have we don't
We're
want to
skipping out on the post long run
no
fueling.
Right.
energy deficiencies here. So where are we going to eat? And you can take us through the day however you like to do it.
Yeah, if only New York had some eating options to fuel appropriately.
I
know.
know. You guys are you have no restaurants.
An
I
absolute
know.
food desert. It's so sad.
The lack of options would be definitely my biggest complaint about New York City. So it is overwhelming how many options there are. I actually think that's a problem. It causes, I will say specifically when I am hungry, the fact that I have to make a decision at that point amongst so many options can be a little bit of a blocker, because then I feel like I need to optimize and then there's too many options. So I'll take you through a day and then we can maybe go from there. So one of the breakfast staples that you'd have to have if you come to New York City is a bagel. I feel like you just have to, especially if you're fueling for your marathon. It's best bang for your buck. And I live in a part of Brooklyn that's this Cobble Hill Carroll Gardens area, which is definitely not a spot where most people come when they come to New York City, because it is a very neighborhoody feel. We're known for the brownstone. And so I say that because all my recommendations are going to be in roughly these neighborhoods, which could be a great place to come to if you're coming out to New York City. But our big kind of bagel spot is this place called Court Street Grocers. And they're known for pretty decent sized bagels. And you will likely have to wait in a line, but that's also really part of the New York City experience, is that for some reason everyone loves to wait in line. So you'll get the opportunity to wait in a line, and then there's so many bagel options, and there's an insanely large amount of cream cheese options. And one thing that I didn't realize, that I'm not sure if is commonplace knowledge, but in New York City, a lot of these bagel shops, they also have non-dairy options. And so they have these like tofu cream cheese options. And so it's very inclusive in that sense, that they have these other options for everyone. So I feel like if you want a good bagel, that's a good spot. And then in terms of lunch, if we're going to stay on the Court Street theme, there's also this spot called Court Street. So that was Court Street Bagels. And now we're going to go to Court Street Grocers, which is not a grocery store, it's a sandwich spot. And they have all of these really interesting sandwich combinations. And the original one was in our neighborhood out here in the Carroll Gardens area, but now they've expanded. So you can go to one in Manhattan. There's one in Williamsburg, which is in the northern part of Brooklyn. And they do all these really different weird sandwich options. And I recently learned that there's a YouTube video where some people decided to go and eat every single sandwich on their menu and decide which one was the best sandwich. And I thought that was hilarious because A, that's a lot of sandwiches to go through, but B, I think it's actually a pretty valid experience to do at this restaurant because each of their sandwiches are so different and so unique to that sandwich spot.
Nice.
Sounds good.
Yeah, you kind of do a round robin. We're out of COVID. We know who we're with. We just bite and pass, right? Until we get through all of them.
I guess that's the philosophy. I think they do this don't quote me on this, but I think they do this at all the restaurants. Like this is their thing
That's okay.
that they do.
Oh, that's fun.
That would be my assumption. But anyways, if the real winner would be to watch that video and then to go there and get the sandwich that they recommend from that video. And the teaser that I'll give is that the sandwich that they recommend is definitely not my favorite sandwich there. So
Okay.
it's kind of, you run that risk.
Yes.
risk.
Okay.
And then
it's funny
no, go
too
ahead.
because I feel like if people like we live in LA, so I don't come to New York City that often. I don't come for work or we'll go for like a weekend or fun, time. But I have not like really explored Brooklyn and like, you were talking about your specific neighborhood. So it'd be kind of fun to come to New York City and like be like, we're not going to do the like normal touristy type of stuff. Central Park and all around there and all that. We're going to like go to a different borough, a different neighborhood and like check it out. So I'm excited.
Yeah, and I couldn't recommend it more, honestly, because I think that you get a very specific side of New York if you come to New York and do those things, the things on the list. And when, for example, my neighborhood, I've had folks visit New York and they do all the touristy things and then they come out to my neighborhood. And constantly the feedback that they're providing is, whoa, this is so much different than anything else we've seen in New York. And in some ways, it's really interesting to see that this is also considered New York City. And that's what attracted me to it, because I'm not a big city person in any way, which is ironic because I'm living in New York City. But in my neighborhood, I am really grateful that I don't live in the heart of some of those busy areas in Manhattan, because I feel like I get a breath of fresh air from being in some of these other spots. And there's still amazing food options and accessibility, and there's still significant foot traffic. And so I still feel like I'm living in a city, but it definitely shows a different side. And so if you know somebody, especially in New York City, I highly encourage you to go to their neighborhood and see where they're living and get the more day in the life experience, because I think that it's such an interesting way to see the city through a different lens.
Yeah.
So now, I thought you were going to take us a little further into the day or in the evening.
Food.
We'll move on because we have other things to cover, but I didn't want to interrupt any goodness that you might.
I know. Dinner options.
Okay, so I'm going to, let's see. Well, okay, I'm doing recency bias. So the place that I went to last night was this really good Thai place that was actually in Prospect Heights. So near the park. This might be something that you do right after an evening run, perhaps. It's called Nourish Thai, and it was really good. And for some reason, everyone says amazing things about it. And I always say for some reason because there's literally 10 Thai places between where I live and this Thai restaurant that I'm like, why wouldn't I not go to any of those other ones? But it was really good. It's Nourish Thai, that's in Prospect Heights. And because we're on the subject of Thai, there's a Thai restaurant in my neighborhood that is known for being really authentic but spicy. And I feel like I can say that very confidently, in the sense that even if you're really into spice, you will likely still get what you want out of this restaurant.
Wow.
Because people are often taking the pills that are helping to reduce, I think they're like anti-acid pills. when they're sitting down to eat here, because it is quite, people are sweating. They're sweating inside.
Wow.
The waiters will potentially profile you when you come in and start to help you navigate the menu, but it is definitely an experience, and the food is really good. And so I love it, and it's called Ugly Baby.
Ugly Baby.
Ugly
Oh,
Baby.
that is
Okay.
funny. What a good
Ugly Baby.
name.
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm definitely going to check out Ugly Baby
Oh.
just because it just sounds like
So
a spicy experience.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, right, yeah. Yeah, well, maybe we don't want too much. And I'm
Well,
and
New
I'm
York,
all for it.
All for the spice.
I'm
You
all
got
for it,
but Allie,
now you're making me question my
are
abilities
you
here to
chickening
handle.
out on ugly? I was gonna say ugly baby.
Baby. No. We're gonna give it a go. We're gonna give it a go.
Ugly Baby, and they
Uh,
have an amazing beer selection. And then New York is also really good at ice cream, so it's just an excuse to then go get the ice cream to kind of cut the spice through a little bit.
yeah.
I was just gonna say, what about dessert?
Yeah, I would. I mean, so this one is not something super niche because you can get them pretty much anywhere, but I do love Van Leeuwen's ice cream,
Mm.
which I only say because you can get that in grocery stores. I'm sure if you guys were to go to your grocery store in LA, they would have the pint of Van Leeuwen's. But what I will say is that when you go into a Van Leeuwen's shop, which are all over New York City, and you actually get it served to you fresh, I have personally observed that the consistency of the ice cream is noticeably different than what you're getting out of the pint in the grocery store. And so I do still recommend it. And there's a very high per capita Van Leeuwen's ratio in the city. And so it's something that you can get pretty much wherever you're staying in New York.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Well, we have to have a place to stay.
Yeah, we're gonna rest and recoup for the next
And
one.
I have to say, I have a caveat, Allison. So we've been having this like very intense conversation this summer about Airbnb.
Yes.
And all have you been hearing about like these like reports that are coming out? It's kind of scary. The hidden cameras, we all know about the exorbitant fees. And so I've been a little like, I was a huge like
We've used a
vacation
lot of
rental
vacation rentals.
person.
Yeah.
And now I'm backing away from that, and I'm back to being a hotel person because I'm like. So anyway, that being said, I'm open to whatever you recommend.
So the latest is that actually it's going to be really hard to get an Airbnb in New York. So I would say a year ago, definitely 2 years ago, it was very easy to get an Airbnb, and that probably would have been my recommendation because then you get to stay in some of these other neighborhoods. But I recently, because my family is actually going to come into town, and was looking at Airbnb for options, and there's very little to nothing on Airbnb. And the city has actually clamped down on regulations when it comes to Airbnb, which is why there's so fewer options. And so it might be that your hands are tied. You have to go to a hotel, which is fine. I will say, though, that the one thing that is maybe a blessing for locals to New York City, but not a blessing for folks visiting, is that the hotels are definitely concentrated in certain areas and not concentrated in certain areas. So if you want to see some of these way more neighborhoody areas, you won't be finding a hotel in a lot of these spots. So then maybe, I guess my recommendation would be that you do the OG Airbnb, which essentially means find somebody that you know in New York, see if they have a spare bedroom or a couch, and go stay on their couch or spare bedroom, which I won't say there's a plethora of people that have spare bedrooms in New York City, but if you can bum it on a couch for a night and then therefore get the experience of seeing that neighborhood, I think that'd be worth it. And maybe stay the other nights in a hotel.
Okay, so say you're like, sorry, I know no one in New York City, and if I do, I don't know anybody that I could stay on their couch. I have to have a place to stay. Do you have one hotel?
Yeah, in Brooklyn, somewhere.
Or it is, wherever.
Yeah,
that's a great question. I can't say that there's a specific hotel that I would endorse,
Okay.
wholeheartedly and put my stamp of approval on it, I would say that there are a lot of hotels in the downtown Brooklyn area. And if you can get a hotel that's close to around downtown Brooklyn where it intersects Brooklyn Heights, that would be really cool area. There are also hotels in Dumbo, which is right on the Brooklyn side of the Manhattan Bridge,
Mhm.
and that area is very nice. And it is a little bit more touristy, but it's still the Brooklyn side, and it'd be much easier to walk into any of these neighborhoods that I'm talking about. And so that would probably be where I would start looking from a research perspective if you're coming to New York and thinking of doing a hotel. But otherwise, I think that the unfortunate thing is that a lot of the hotels, the the price sort of says it. I've stayed in various hotels when I was just starting to move out here, and there were some really nice ones in Manhattan. And it was kind of like, yeah, if you're willing to pay, then you will get a really nice experience in a hotel. And that's kind of the nice thing about New York in general, which is that if you do want to have that experience, there's no shortage of very nice things that you can
Mhm.
do in New York City. And so if that's the type of vacation that you want to have, if you're willing to pay and you are going to pay, it will probably be like a very, very nice experience.
Nice.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Running store?
Yeah, running store and races that you would
Oh,
recommend.
yeah,
We'll
yeah.
do 2 for 1.
Oh, okay. So running store, there's one that now I wish that I knew the name of it, but it's at the intersection of Bergen and Washington, which is
Okay.
near the Barclays Center. And they're actually positioning themselves as for newer runners, but I like it because they feel like they bring a little bit of a Brooklyn community vibe. And I think it's something like Brooklyn Running Store. That's the name has the word Brooklyn and run in the name. And then I feel like I should also do a shout out to the New York Roadrunners Run Center, which is in near Columbus Circle. So it's in Manhattan. And it's a really cool vibe because obviously New York Roadrunners does a ton of the races in New York. And so you get a lot of the running culture through the Run Center. And then you can also get a bunch of running products, especially New Balance stuff you'll find there. And so that's also a really interesting option, which leads me to races. I will say I have a bias for the Brooklyn races. New York City Marathon is an obvious one, so we don't even have to go
Mhm.
that everyone already knows and they're doing that one. I really love the half marathon distance, and two that I did earlier this year that I loved. One was there's a New York City half marathon that starts in Brooklyn near Prospect Park, and then it actually goes over the bridge into Manhattan. It's called the United Half, and it ends in Central Park. And I loved that run. It was a really good time of the year. It was March, and you get to see a couple different boroughs. You get to go over the bridge. They close down the east side, so you get to run along the east side and then cut into the park. The one thing that I will say though is that's not a good race if you're trying to PR. It's a good race if you're just trying to see New York City, and I wouldn't suggest trying to PR that because the last mile will feel
Mm.
you'll feel it because
Yeah.
but um you get to go through Midtown and see all of the areas with the lights, and it's definitely a really interesting race. The other one that I would recommend if you are trying to PR is the Brooklyn half. And there's two that happen, one that goes from North Brooklyn in Williamsburg down to the area that I'm in, so it ends in Prospect Park. And that one's a really fun one. But the one that if you really are going for a PR that you should do is the other Brooklyn half. So there's two Brooklyn halves. And this one, it starts in Prospect Park, you do a loop, and then you go down to Coney Island. And
Ooh.
it is the second half is like a downhill stretch. It's a very Brooklyn race in the sense that if you know Prospect Park well, you'll know the full first part of that race like the back of your hand. And it tends to be a really fast race. People are definitely PRing during that one.
Okay.
And is it actually called the other Brooklyn half? No, I,
That's a
no, I was,
great question.
No.
yeah, no, I was thinking that's kind of clever, but I wasn't
It
sure.
should be, but really what it is that there's two different organizations that put them on.
Oh, okay.
And so the Brooklyn half that is in Brooklyn from Williamsburg to the first one that I was mentioning, that one is put on by NYC Runs. And
Okay.
then the other one is put on by Roadrunner. And
Okay.
so that's how people usually differentiate them. I think, and you might want to pull a few other people here, but I think that if you just say, I'm doing the Brooklyn half, people will probably think you're doing the Williamsburg to Prospect Park one because it traverses Brooklyn.
Is that
And
in May?
that one is in May, but I think it's earlier in the year. It's either in April or May, but it's definitely early in the year because the other Brooklyn half, which is the New York Roadrunners Brooklyn half, not named the other Brooklyn half,
Yes.
although maybe I'll pitch that to them. That one is definitely in May. And the risk that you run with that one is that it is hot. And it's not only hot, but it's probably the first hot weekend. And so there have been some times where people are experiencing heat stroke and either it's raining and it's really hot or it's unseasonably hot. And it's the time of year where your body is definitely not yet adjusted. And so that's the one thing that I would keep in mind if you're thinking about doing the other Brooklyn half.
Yeah.
Okay. This is good to know. Okay, so what about like what would you like like places of interest, or if we have been to New York City but we haven't been to Brooklyn or your area, what would you say you need to go and check this out while you're here?
Ooh, I love that question. So I would say the funny thing about New York is that the things that most people do is eat and then also go see shows. And so in terms of eating, we covered that. One thing that I will say that's really interesting is they have a Japan village in Industry Cities, which is in Red Hook. And they have a market there, and there's a space where there's a bunch of different Japanese style restaurants, but they're more like grab and go. And that's one of my favorite things to do in New York City is to go to these random market type areas where there's a bunch of grab and go food and you walk around and then you try to figure out which one you're going to choose, and then you can go with a bunch of friends, get a bunch of different stuff, and then sit down and eat all of them together. But they also have a market, and in the market, they sell a bunch of products that I have not regularly seen outside of Japan. And I think that's really cool. So that's one. There's actually another market that I really like that's like that I'll just mention, which is DeKalb, also in Brooklyn. And that one will have a lot more diversity in terms of what you can eat in that market. I actually usually still get the sushi there because I have slightly obsession might be a strong word, but I'll take it with sushi. But there's so many different options that it's really good food. Anything from tacos, they have Jamaican, Caribbean, Southern. That's a really cool hall style vibe. And then the other thing that I would recommend is a show. And there's actually some really cool comedy show type things. And one of the areas that has reoccurring shows is this place called Union Hall. And you can go there. They have like a shuffleboard, but then if you go into their basement, you can actually get tickets to these random comedy shows. And the only caveat that I'll say is that it's kind of hit or miss. You might get somebody who's great and you might get somebody who's mediocre.
Yeah.
So you just got to walk in accepting your fate. And I think that's actually maybe part of the fun because you're committed either way. You're seeing, no matter what, you're seeing somebody who is putting themselves out there. They are grabbing a microphone and doing something I would never do, which is tell jokes in front of strangers for up to an hour, maybe even more.
Oh, wow.
And
That's a long
so
time.
I really do love that. I love that about the New York City experience. And so that would be the other thing, that if you're going to see a show and you want to do something off the beaten path, that's a really good option.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
This is all good stuff. I
Yeah.
definitely need to make a trip to Brooklyn and check all of this out. I'm sure everyone listening is going to really appreciate these
Yeah.
recommendations.
Totally
I
covered
know. Well, if you do, let me know. You can join the run club. I can give you even more There's no shortage of recommendations. That's the thing.
That'd be
Yeah,
awesome.
and that's part of the reason why we do this is because there are places where there's very little, and so you need to hit the right ones, and then there's others where there's so much, and you need to hit the right ones because you don't have all
Yeah.
year, right? We're here for
Right.
3-4 days. I want to try to get something unique and interesting, and that caters to me as a runner and a
And
foodie. So
we've had several different runners from Brooklyn on the show, and
all different.
everybody has a different experience, a different list of recommendations. So it's pretty cool that it's so eclectic and diverse,
Yeah.
and I love that.
A lot of variety.
It'd be crazy to me if we actually came on and 2 people had the same recommendation, because then you know that spot
Must
is
be.
crazy good because
Yeah,
everyone apparently in
exactly.
Brooklyn knows about it. So that would be really fascinating if there was an overlap.
For
I'm
sure.
gonna have to put them together and see if there's any overlap because now I can't remember them all now, but they
yeah,
are definitely all unique. So
yeah, for
It would be
sure.
so nice if there was a cheat sheet list of all the places that people have recommended in the various cities.
Okay, if you could run anywhere in the world, where would it be and why?
Oh my gosh. I would run in the Sierras in California. So either in maybe Sequoia or Mammoth, or Yosemite. And it would be because one, I kind of like running at altitude and I never get to do it because I've always lived at sea level. And two, because I think that as somebody who's been living in New York for a while, I get very strong urges to just be completely in nature, surrounded by trees, seeing the color green, which, if you do on a regular basis, do not take it for granted because it's the thing I miss the most about being in New York. And I'm from California. And so I love the landscape there. I love the unique stone formations in Yosemite. I love the mountains, and I am like a beach girl, but I would say that if I were to run somewhere, that would be my definite answer.
yeah.
Ooh, that's good.
So I was thinking first. I thought, okay, maybe Central Northern California, but now I'm thinking OC. Is that where you grew up?
I grew up in San Diego.
Okay, yeah. I was thinking when you said you're like, oh, I love but then I'm a beach girl. I'm like, okay, we got to keep going south. But she likes to go up north and inland to get the whole other sides of California. But
Well, it's tricky because I lived in San Francisco for 8 years. So
yeah,
that's why I'm probably
you're a
giving off a
Californian.
confusing vibe. Yeah, you were
Yes,
right though.
yes, you're a
Yeah,
Californian. Up
for
A very
sure.
California.
south, all of it.
All of
Good
it.
deal.
Yes.
Well, Allison, this has been
I
absolutely a
know.
pleasure. We appreciate, your area of expertise and sharing with your journey. And, we'll make sure that everybody can find you in all the ways possible in the show notes.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for this really enriching and super important conversation that needs to happen more often for endurance athletes and just people in general. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me and for all of the really thoughtful and fun discussion topics.
Cool.
Sounds good. Well, when we come to Brooklyn, we'll call you up and go on a run.
We will.
Please do. Seriously.
All right.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Allison.